You know, it's funny, until you lose yourself, you don't know who you are. And I suppose I've had 18 months to sit back and mourn the person I was. And I was fit, healthy, active. I was 50. I felt as fitter than I'd been all my life. I like to think I was as fit as someone 20 years younger than me, and I was tall and I had long legs and I bounced around and I never had a minute to spare. I was always doing or buzz here, buzz there. I had very active hobbies, and I climbed up hills and I ran 10Ks, and I never stopped really. And then your whole life just blows apart, you know.
Well, you were a keen horse rider for 30 years. Tell me about that day, if you can.
Well, it was a cross-country training practice. I mean, I was one of these sad people who, did it for all those years, but never did it to any great high level, because I had a child. I was always so busy. I never had time to do it properly, and I just mucked around at it. But I was fairly accomplished, and I didn't fall off very often. And I had all the proper gear, and it was Good Friday last year, 2010, and it was a cross-country training day, and the jumps were not very big, and I had a good horse, and you go along and you think, hey, this is wonderful. The sort of the little girl in you thinks, I'm just going to go out and have a lot of fun, and hey, look at me on my big chestnut horse. And in a split second, he stopped at the jump. Maybe he wasn't warmed up properly. I guess it was my fault. And he stopped, and I went over his head, and I landed on my face. And in a split second, life changes.
You said you realised, actually, when you were lying there, that your life had changed forever.
I knew. I was fully conscious throughout, because it wasn't a high-speed fall. It wasn't a big jump. It was just the way I fell, my face landed in the ground, and my body kind of flipped over, and it was like a face plant in a rugby tackle or something like that. It was just the way it happened, and I felt it was very sore, and I felt everything went bright red, and my whole body was suffused with this intense feeling of warmth, and I just knew I'd done something catastrophic. I just knew. So
what do you remember about those first few weeks in hospital?
Crawling up the walls with morphine. Horrible morphine-filled dreams. I mean, I was pretty sick. I had to be ventilated. Because there was so much swelling, they had to operate to stabilize my neck, and there was so much swelling, it was quite tricky, and they put me on a ventilator, and then they couldn't take me off the ventilator because the swelling got worse, and for days, it seemed like months, I was on this ventilator, and you can't talk and you can't do anything, and you're heavily sedated, but at the same time you're aware, and you try and communicate with your family. You have this alphabet that you point at, and you try and communicate with your family, and it's fairly hideous, and you don't, I think at that point you don't really come to terms with anything. All you're doing is just fighting for some kind of normality in your head, and you don't even think about what's happened to your body or what the consequences are.
I've been following your columns, as have thousands of readers, and it does seem to be small steps for you, very much a day at a time, and a lot of support from the staff where you've been in hospital.
You know how lucky I was. I was picked up by a helicopter and flown straight to the Southern General in Glasgow, where the spinal unit, the National Scottish Spinal Unit, is. And I was incredibly lucky, because it's a fantastic operation there, and they're one of the best centre spinal units in Europe, if not the world. And the care I got was amazing. but nobody can cure the fact that you've done something so huge to your body that you have to learn the hard way. And when they tell you that you're going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, you kind of don't believe it, because you think something like that doesn't happen to me. I'm Superwoman. And it's a very gradual process of realizing that you're not Superwoman. You're a rag doll, and you just fight through that, and you kind of learn that your body will get some recovery. And I think that's where my fight has been, in realizing that if you're lucky enough, you get some regrowth of nerves, but nerves regrow at a millimetre a week. I can't remember if it's a millimetre a day or a millimetre a week. It's very, very slow. And that's the game. It's a long game. That's the game I'm playing.
How do you keep going? Because, it is clearly very tough, but there is a fighter in you.
Well, yes, there is a fighter. I'm a bit bolshy. I'm a bit of a rebel. So there was that. I mean, when I was told you'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, I immediately thought, well, I'm not. I'm going to get better. I'm going to get onto crutches. And I sort of defied them all, and I probably am still defying them. And I'm probably, to a certain extent, still in denial, because I may never get on crutches, but I have got back on my feet. I have sort of beaten the system enough to get back on my feet, and I can shuffle 20 yards or something on a Zimmer. What else? How else did I do it? I did it. It was love. It was my family. I couldn't have done it without my family. I did it for love, because I couldn't let them down, and I had to fight for them. So, and when you're fighting for somebody else, it's much easier fighting for someone else than it is fighting for yourself. So that's what I do. I fight for them, my son and my husband and my brother and my sister.
Because you said in one of your columns that very early on you had that conversation with your husband where you said, look, if you want to walk away, and he said, well, you're stuck with me.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, you sort of have to say that. It's it's almost like etiquette, isn't it? You have to say, look, I mean, you didn't agree to marry a tetraplegic, and if you want to give up now, then I'll quite understand, and I won't be bitter. But he just laughed and said, don't be so bloody stupid. So, and I think, and I've tried to, I mean, I have really bad days when I'll say the same thing to him again, and he just says, you would do the same for me. So it's true. I would.
You have come a long way since it first happened in April 2010, but does it feel that to you?
18 months. Sometimes it feels like 18 days, sometimes it feels like 18 years. That probably doesn't make much sense, but it doesn't feel like a long time in terms of my recovery, because I haven't come as far as I want to come, and I've got a lot further to go, and I know I'm going to go a lot further. But at the same time, in a year and a half, a lot's happened, and I have to acknowledge that. The world has changed and things have moved on, and it's a rather strange feeling. When I go, I don't go out a lot, but when I do go out now, I feel like someone emerging from like a little baby bird emerging from an egg. And the world is a big, strange place. So 18 months on, it feels even stranger.
What was it like going home for the first time? Because you'd had a lot of intensive physiotherapy, which you're still having, but then you were able to go home. That must have seemed like a strange environment after the hospital, even though it was so familiar to you.
It was terrifying. I mean, they let you out on what they call weekend pass. First of all, you just go home for a day, and then scary one, you go home for a night, and then a long weekend, and eventually you get discharged. So there's not that sudden shock. But I mean, the first afternoon I went home, my husband pushed me down a steep slope, and I very nearly fell out the front of the wheelchair. So that was a learning curve. And the next weekend I went home, he left my wheelchair cushion lying on the pavement outside the spinal unit. So we got home, and that was a real catastrophe. And then another weekend I went home, and we forgot to put the anti-tippers on my wheelchair down, so that when I leant backwards, there was nothing to stop me, and I crashed over backwards and landed on the concrete, and he thought he'd killed me. And I think I've shortened his life a lot, but we laugh about it now. Now that I've been home long enough to cope. But yes, it was totally terrifying, because there's this huge support system in the spinal unit. Everyone else is handicapped. There's wheelchairs all around you. There's people who are less sick than you are, people who are far more sick, and you feel that you've got a place in a nice, safe world. And suddenly, back in the real world, and you realise how little you can do, and how small your house is. Well, that's pretty terrifying.
What is a typical day for you now, Melanie? Is there such a thing?
Well, you know, it takes me 2 hours to get toileted and dressed and through to the kitchen. Those 2 hours before my injury, I would have got up, fed 2 horses, mucked them out, turned them out in the field, washed, showered, driven to Glasgow, read all the papers, come up with 20 good ideas for a news story or a column for the paper. But as I say, I'm just reaching the kitchen in time for a cup of coffee after 2 hours. So it takes me 15 minutes to make a cup of coffee. It takes me 5 minutes and a lot of energy to push myself up the ramp from one end of the house to the other. If I forget my reading glasses and I've left them in the office, you know, I have to take a deep breath and think, have I got the strength to go and get them, or shall I just not read? I find I spend a lot of my day reading or typing or writing, because there's very little else I can do. You know, I can't, my hands are very damaged. I can't put stuff away. I can't mend stuff. I can't use a sewing machine. I can't, you know, my son had a really good pair of shorts and all they needed was a stitch on the zip, and I couldn't even fix them for him. And it's stuff like that that really, really frustrates you. Yeah. Really frustrates you.
You have kept the column going, though, and I and thousands of people have been reading it and been very moved by it. I understand it's one of the most read columns that the Times have ever published. But why was it so important for you to continue with that column and make your personal struggles and battles so public?
I think it helped me process stuff. I mean, the weird thing is that I started writing columns in my head when I was in the morphine. I started writing columns in my head when I was in the tunnel getting an MRI scan. And it was a way of trying to express it, trying to get it out, trying to make sense of it all. It was like being a war correspondent from your own front line, which is your body. And I think it helped me. It helped me. Writing about it has helped me cope. Keep my feet on the ground. Isn't that funny? It's not funny at all, really.
I'm sure you always find yourself using expressions like that accidentally now, don't you?
Yeah, you just have to laugh about it. I mean, it's very black, but black humour's great. So I write because it helped save my life in the beginning, because I really wanted to communicate. I kept thinking, God, this is great stuff to write down. I've got to tell people about this. This is the morphine stuff, you know. This is so weird. I've got to write down what's happening to my head. And then it became a soap opera, and I'm a bit sad, really. I'm my own soap opera.
Have you been surprised at the reaction to it?
Oh, hugely so. It's almost scary. I feel, I hide away from it a bit. It's as if I'm two different people. I'm the people out there that people know the column, readers know about me, and I'm just me, this quiet person that doesn't really see many people and lives in a house in a little cottage in the hills. And I don't quite believe it in a way. I suppose I'm still a bit in denial. Just as I'm a bit in denial about how injured I am, I'm a bit in denial about the column and the power of the column. But maybe it's best that way, you know.
You did say recently in one of your columns, I often wonder whether by choosing rehab or bust in this most public fashion, I've trapped myself in a hell of my own making. But then you went on to say, I can't give up now. I'd let too many people down. Is that what it is for you, keeping going for other people? Or is it for yourself as well?
I really did trap myself, didn't I? And that's one of the truest things I've ever written. I can't give up now, because the days when I sit down to write a column and I just think I've got nothing to say but sadness and frustration and tears. I think, but I can't do that. I can't let people down, so it does keep me going. Just as it keeps me going to the gym, I have to go to the gym, and I keep doing the rehab, and I keep trying to stand up. I do that. I do it for my family. I do it for myself, and it's tough, and it's getting tougher. And I know I'm never going to may never get onto crutches, but I've got to keep going. And I get angry. I probably upset a lot of people actually, because I hear from other wheelchair users who sort of say, in a sense, it's a betrayal to keep wanting to get out of your wheelchair, and that you're not going to fully accept your plight until you accept that you're in a wheelchair. And they tell me, oh, I didn't really progress with my life until I gave up fighting to walk again, and I just accepted I was a wheelchair, and then I got on with my life. And maybe I just haven't got there yet. Maybe that's what I was trying to say, that's coming around the corner at some point. But I'm still bolsh enough not to have got there yet, and I'm still fighting to recover, and I am still getting recovery. I mean, 18 months on, my abdomen is a lot stronger. My pelvis now tilts, and I've got a little bit more skin sensation, feeling in my skin, my legs. And so I keep thinking there's still stuff happening, and I'm just not going to give up yet, though maybe I should, but I refuse to.
And there are positives, because you have just passed your driving assessment, so the next hurdle is to learn to drive a modified car.
Yeah, I can now. Once I get my new license back from the DVLA, I'll be able to get a car customized with, hand controls, and I'll be out on the road, so people should beware. I think it's going to take me a while to. Little steps. It's going to take a while to get the confidence to get out there, and the thought of actually driving anywhere on my own and using one of those remote devices to get my wheelchair down from the roof it feels a long way away. But I'll keep going, and hopefully I've come a long way in 18 months, so maybe in a year's time I'll be driving myself places. Maybe my big dream, maybe I'll even be able to stand up from my wheelchair and turn around and sit down in the driver's seat. That's to do what they call a standing transfer, that's one of my big ambitions, because that would make life a lot simpler.
Well, I do hope you fulfil it. You have come a long way. Finally, Melanie, I'm wondering, just looking back on the last 18 months, what you think has changed in you, what you have learned about yourself.
I still feel the same me. I mean, that's the weird thing. I think I still feel the same me. I'm still me in my head, though I get a bit I lose words sometimes, which irritates me. But what's changed is that I'm no longer a person of action. I'm no longer a physical person, and I used to be a really physical person. I used to be always on the go, doing stuff. I was quite dynamic, maybe not dynamic intellectually particularly, only on demand, but physically dynamic. I was always dashing around doing stuff, and I have a great sense of mourning for that person that I've lost. That's where the bereavement is. But you do hold on to the essence of yourself, I think. And my family still think I'm me, so I try and still be me for them, and I can still laugh at the same stuff and still really enjoy books and reading and seeing people, and I just can't bounce around quite like I used to do.